Good evening, and welcome to another chapter of The Miracle Within. We're looking at A Course in Miracles and really working on revealing the deeper depths of the message within A Course in Miracles. And it is a very complex book if you are in resistance to hearing what's being presented to you. So that's why I'm doing these little chat sessions once a week to help people get on board with looking at the book in depth. And hopefully I am broadcasting here. I'm not seeing anybody showing up yet, but I would assume that that will change. There's Maria, and it looks like Zahendra is also showing up. So welcome to another Course in Miracles discussion. Hopefully my audio is showing up good. So there's Jennifer. Jennifer, is my audio good? And Jacqueline, hello Jacqueline. Great, we got some people. We're hanging out. We're looking at A Course in Miracles, and we're on a journey to discovery. You know, all of our ills, all of our upsets and upheavals are really based on identity. We keep imagining that we are this separate person that is running through the wilds of this material reality without protection and without assistance and without compassion and without love and without all of the things that we imagine that we need. And A Course in Miracles came along and said, well, no, that's really not the way it is, but that's the way you believe it is. And so that is what you will experience in your own reality. And this is the beauty of the Course. It constantly reinforces the idea that our belief system, our mind, is the supreme power in our life experience. So whatever it is that we believe, we will experience. So if you want to see what the results of your beliefs are, just look around, because the world you inhabit is an outpicturing of your ongoing thinking. So this evening I thought we would go back and take a look at the first part of A Course in Miracles, where we're really getting into some deep dialogue about what reality is. And that comes up in chapter 2, which is titled The Separation and the Atonement. And in this first section of chapter 2, we look at the origins of separation. To extend is a fundamental aspect of God which he gave to his son. So basically what we're getting from this first sentence is that God created us by extending himself, or itself, to be more politically correct. And within that idea is the idea of our own capacity to extend ourselves. So, you know, you get married, you have kids, and you see yourself and your children. Well, this goes much, much deeper than that. Imagine yourself as a perfect being, as a reflection of God, dwelling within God, and extending that self that you are, producing it in infinitude in all directions throughout eternity. And that's how the whole thing works. Because this world, we're always looking at our limitations, looking at our restrictions, looking at our boundaries. And the truth is, in the place where we actually are dwelling, we have no boundaries. We have no limitations. We have no body. And that may sound kind of scary at first, but once you begin to explore that idea of being limitless, all of a sudden the world takes on a whole different meaning, because you begin to recognize that everything in this world is a reflection of things going on within you. So if you're seeing love and joy and happiness in the world around you, then you're living that experience within you. If you are conversely seeing mayhem and murder and destruction, then you still have a lot of interior turmoil, a lot of things going on inside your own psyche that are being reaffirmed by being pictured in the world that you inhabit. So how do we get out of this dilemma? And that's what we're looking at tonight. In the creation, God extended himself to his creations and imbued them with the same loving will to create. So your natural urge is to be a creator. You have not only been fully created, but have also been created perfect. And that's where we get into real trouble as far as our human identity. You know, one of our favorite statements is, well, nobody's perfect. And you hear that all over the place. And if you are looking at the world through the eyes of the ego, that certainly appears to be true. So that's why we have to step back. That's why we have to withdraw our attention from the ego and step into our truth, step into our godness. And that really is literally what it is. We are God within God. But because we are imagining all of these conflicts and ills and fears and sorrows, we end up manifesting an illusory world that is filled with all the turmoil that we have built up within ourselves. It says no child of God can lose this ability because it is inherent in what he is. But he can use it inappropriately by projecting, and that's what I was just talking about. We're projecting these imagined flaws outward and failing to look inward to the source of all of these flaws. The inappropriate use of extension or projection occurs when you believe that some emptiness or lack exists in you, and that you can fill it with your own ideas instead of truth. This process involves the following steps. First, you believe what God created can be changed by your own mind. And that can never happen. Second, you believe that what is perfect can be rendered imperfect or lacking. So every time you're looking at the world around you and seeing, you know, this guy's an idiot and that guy's flawed and this person's sick and that person's lame, those are all distortions coming from within you, and you're projecting them into the world around you. Third, you believe that you can distort the creations of God, including yourself. So when you're looking at that politician that you hate, or that religious leader that you hate, or that you know, competition in the workplace that you hate, all of those things are a distortion of the truth. The truth is, everybody that you see, once you look at them beyond the eyes of your own ego, you will recognize them as the Christ. You will recognize them as what God created them to be. And fourth, you believe that you can create yourself, and that the direction of your own creation is up to you. And that's, again, such a false image of who we are, because we were created in a state of perfection, and yet we've taken all these different guilt issues on, all these dark issues around our identity, and it has not served us well since the beginning of time, you know. And so obviously we want to escape from time and get back to eternity to re-experience the perfection of who we are. So in regards to that, today I thought I would take a little detour from just keeping it all about A Course in Miracles and go back to one of my favorite scripts from the Old Testament, the 23rd Psalm, a Psalm of David. And this is such a beautiful, beautiful thing. And just in the last couple of weeks, it's been coming up over and over in my mind because of the celestial nature of the thoughts that were expressed in this psalm. It says, "The Lord is my shepherd, I lack nothing. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside quiet waters. He refreshes my soul. He guides me along the right paths for his name's sake." In other words, his guidance is always there because he knows that you are him or you are it and it is you. "Even though I walk through the darkest valley," and in the traditional Old English version of this, it's "through the valley of the shadow of death." And that's what this world is. Everywhere you look, in every corner, on every horizon, you see death. In order for you to have a meal, you have to kill an animal or kill a plant. Death, death, death. We reiterate death over and over again. It's an orgasm of death here. And that's where we are. We are in this valley of death. "I will fear no evil." Well, if other things can die, then that means that you can die. So, you know, we do live in a state of fear until we shift our consciousness back to our identity in God. "I will fear no evil, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me." And that basically is, you know, the idea of the rod is the wisdom that God shares with us, and the staff is this sustenance that God shares with us. So, in actual fact, we don't need to eat because God is our source of life. But our body needs to be fed. And as we shift our identity back to the body over and over again, we get into trouble. So we really have to work on that identity issue. Who am I? I am a spiritual being. I am created in the image of God, and I dwell within God. And that's the only avenue out of here. "You prepare a table before me in the presence of mine enemies. You anoint my head with oil. My cup overflows. Surely your goodness and love will follow me all the days of my life, and I will dwell in the house of the Lord forever." And this, you know, this last section really reiterates over and over again how powerful our belief is. As we begin to step away from that belief that we are separate from God, all of a sudden we recognize the presence of God, which has been sustaining us since the beginning of time. So that really is where the work has to be done, is in our capacity to correctly identify who we are, and then to embrace that identity, to reaffirm that identity over and over and over again. Because our little minds have twisted and distorted the idea of who we are. We have created ourselves as something separate and apart from God. And since God is life, well, the only creation that could work outside of God would be death. So we gave ourselves a body so that we could die over and over again. And that really is the core of what A Course in Miracles is all about. It's getting us on board with the truth of our true nature, who it is that we actually are, and what it is that our mission in life is. And our mission is to be a creator, just like our creator. In other words, we're just extending love. We're extending that idea of perfection throughout eternity in all directions. And that really is the reason for our frustration when we're indulging ourselves in this material world. Because no matter what we imagine that we create here, it is such a shortfall of reward when you consider the idea of creating love and extending it throughout infinity. So if you are, always have an appetite that just simply can't be quenched, if you've always been on a quest and didn't know where you were going, but you knew you were looking for something, well, the something that you've been looking for is yourself. And that's something that you are unwilling to acknowledge is that you are the self in perfection, the self of God. And those are pretty heavy thoughts. Not a lot of religions come along and throw those ideas out in front of you. You know, most religions give us a lot of ideas around guilt and shame and sorrow and, you know, separation and and worst and most of all, a punitive theme that runs through especially the Middle Eastern, the Abrahamic traditions. As soon as you get into Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, you start loading up on guilt. And the guilt gets worse the older you get, because every time you fart in an elevator, you carry a little bit of guilt from doing that. You know, you can see it on the people's faces around you. They're looking at you like, damn, dude. And the truth is, we load ourselves up on so much guilt. And then the church or the temple or the synagogue or whatever organization comes along and reinforces that guilt. And A Course in Miracles is an invitation to step out of that guilt, because all of this is an illusion. None of it is real, and to withhold forgiveness from yourself is the greatest attempt at sin that we can conceive of. You know, you have to be able to forgive others before you can forgive yourself. And when you arrive at that place where you're finally at peace with yourself, you recognize that in the process, along the journey, you have forgiven everybody around you for everything that you imagined has been done to you. And that's the beauty of the journey, because it purifies your vision of the world and you see the world through a different set of eyes. So going on to another section here, I'm going to flip over to the New Testament. And in the Acts of the Apostles, we have a story about Paul when he was standing before the Areopagus and was sharing his vision, his understanding of his spiritual journey and what the journey back to God is all about. And he says, God intended that they would seek him and perhaps reach out for him and find him, though he is not far from each one of us. And this is what the Course teaches us. God's will for us is that we are restored to our divine truth, that we are restored to our place in heaven, which is the mind of God. So the only thing that's blocking us from that is ourselves. So Paul, 2,000 years ago, was talking about how God's will for us is to return home, and to return home not as the beaten and defeated ego, but to return home in the glory of our true nature, in the glory of our Christness. He goes on to say, and this is why I pulled this up here for us tonight to examine, one of my favorite lines from all testaments, from all books, is, "For in him, in God, we live and move and have our being. As some of your own poets have said, we are his offspring." So again, this is reinforcing that idea that we are children of the divine, and not just some of us, but all of us. Until you can get past that hurdle of imagining that you're with the white sheep and those guys over there are with the black sheep and the black sheep are condemned, well, you're not going to make it. You're going to be stuck in a landing pattern. You know, you got your flaps down, your wheels out, you're ready to land, but every time you try to approach that runway, it vanishes right in front of you because you haven't allowed yourself to see beyond your condemnation of those around you. So you have to be invested 100% in seeing the pure God creation that surrounds you in every individual you encounter. Therefore, being offspring of God, we should not think that the divine being is like gold or silver or stone, an image formed by man's skill and imagination. So we're being urged to go back to the truth, which is that we are not corporeal, we are not physical. We are in truth a spiritual being without boundaries, without limitations, without bodies, without a need for a haircut, as I currently am running around here in my little universe. We have all these imagined flaws that are peculiar to the fact that we have embraced a physical identity. So all of these flaws, all of these hangnails that we have, all of these scars, all of these wounds, all of these marks that scar our bodies are from imagined experiences that were a result of our believing that we were something less than perfect. And that is very, very interesting, because our perfection prevails even beyond the tomb. You know, you may think you die, you fall into a deeper sleep, you go comatose for a while and wake up in a different body. And oh my God, you're getting chased by dragons and evil people, and you know, the adventure starts all over again. And at some point we have to come to a place where we don't resist it, we transcend it. We stop and we look at the illusion, and then we quiet ourselves. We go back down to that place where we dwell in eternity. We stop the mind, because the mind is the projector. You know, our mind is so very powerful, and we are so oblivious to the amount of power that we have over our experience in life that it creates a tragic experience, a tragic lifetime for all of us over and over and over again. So why don't we get on board with the idea of moving to a higher plateau? One of my favorite little ziggles here from the book of Job, 12:10 says, "In whose hand is the life of every living thing, and the breath of all mankind." So all of life is really of the presence and the activity of God. And that's what makes all of life so very sacred. Now, we can destroy the body that it may be shelled around, but the truth is that life force, the dogs, the cats, the plants, you know, the people, all life is God in manifestation. And when we can look beyond the shell that we have encapsulated these different fragments of God, because we imagine that we broke God, we fragmented God, we separated ourselves and created all this separation around us. Once we move beyond that and start to restore our journey back to the truth, then all of a sudden life takes on a whole different meaning and a whole different content and a whole different color. So remember that whenever you are vacillating about something in your life, when you have that flat tire, when you have that empty bank account, when you have that appendectomy that almost takes you out, keep going back over and over again to that one very clear, beautiful statement that Paul made. For in him we live and move and have our being. As certain also of your own poets have said, for we are his offspring. And that's the beauty of the Course, is it constantly gets us back to that recognition that we are the offspring of the divine. And what could be more divine, literally, than that? So, looking at all of the different things here, we've got some beautiful people here who have joined us for this evening. I'm going to kind of wind it down here and take a look at I just opened the book. I didn't go to something I had pre-selected. I just thought, well, we'll allow Spirit to move through us here. And I broke it open to chapter 23, section 3, and it says, "Is it not true that you do not recognize some of the forms attack can take? If it is true attack in any form will hurt you, and will do so just as much as in another form that you do recognize, then it must follow that you do not always recognize the source of pain." So all of us have this program going on in our consciousness that projects fear and projects all of these ideas about vulnerability into the world that we inhabit. And it does so specifically targeting our physical body. So then we can say, oh, look, I've got this scar, I've got this wound, look at the blood. Look at how crippled I am. Look at how feeble I have become. Look at how life has shortchanged me. Look at what a victim I have become. And as long as we are confused, as long as we are not thinking clearly, we will continue to repeat these experiences over and over again to prove to ourselves that we are, in fact, a physical body, vulnerable, and constantly under attack. So we have to really look at the source of all of our conflict, the source of all of our fear, and come to the understanding that it is merely our own unwillingness to allow ourselves to be reconciled with God. So if you believe somewhere in your subconscious that you not only attacked God, but succeeded in actually separating yourself from God, then you are living in a state of fear. Because if you follow that line of thought, then you can imagine that God is looking for retribution. You know, that's what I was talking about with the Abrahamic traditions. All three of them give us this vision of man being cast out of the Garden of Eden, of God getting really pissed off and trying to squash us, trying to evict us from God's presence and grace. So really, the journey is a very simple journey through the fear that you have created by imagining that you have succeeded in killing yourself or in killing God, because separation from God would be death. So it's all very, very simple. There is nothing complex in A Course in Miracles. There is nothing complex in enlightenment. It's all based on one concept, which is the concept of non-duality. There is nothing here but God. And as soon as you go off the rails with God and, if you can imagine God and me, God and, you know, the Republican Party, God and the Catholic Church, whatever it is that you have got an and around, then you're missing the point. You're missing the understanding. There is nothing else but God. We live and move and have our being in God. And that is the beginning of the restoration of sanity. You know, and you look around in this world today, and it's become so obvious that we have created a projection of insanity because we believe that we are insane ourselves. You know, you look at what's going on with the politics, the religions, the conflicts in the Middle East, the bombings here, the bombings there, the shootings in school. All of those things are madness. They're insane. There is no justification or reason for them. Nobody can actually come up with a valid reason for any of these things. So what we're doing is we are allowing ourselves to merge back in to that which created us, and to know the truth of who we are and what our life is all about. So I will be back in 1 week. Tomorrow I will be celebrating 72 revolutions around the sun, and it's going to be an exciting day here. We're going to have a toast to the fact that I was never born and I will never die. And even if this body suddenly slips away, I am always here, and I am always with you. And we are always one in love. So get out there, share the love, pass love around. Have a fantastic week, and I'll see you in 7 days.